Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for Factors of Self-Funding, Evaluating the Pros and Cons webinar today. My name is Stacy, and I will be your moderator. ERISA attorney Larry Grugine is our presenter. We will be recording the webinar today and posting to our website after for your reference. I will be keeping the webinar muted to avoid any background noise. We will pause for questions throughout. To submit a question, see the Questions tab on your toolbar on the right-hand side of your screen. I will read your questions aloud and Larry will then answer. Our next webinar will be on Tuesday, April 17th and is entitled Training the Technique, Advanced ERISA Compliance. To stay in the know on all things Benefit Express, including webinar invites, legislative updates, blog posts, and more, subscribe to benefitexpress.info/subscribe. Now I will hand it off to Larry.
Thank you very much. What I'm going to try to do today is introduce the whole area of self-funding, discuss what it is entailing, what do you have to do if you decide to self-fund it, what are the pros and cons. Then I'm going to build on that to talk about some of the structures, what do you have to do, who is involved, so you get a complete picture of if you're deciding to go self-funded, what it will take. So let's go through this. And I'll stop periodically for questions. So it's important that if you have a question, ask it. And so at any time, Stacy can interrupt me and I can answer your question. So as I indicated before, we'll talk about what self-funding is. Some people call it self-insurance. So basically it is not relying on an insurance company to provide all benefits. And more employers are considering it. It was very common for large employers to self-fund. The mega companies always self-fund. Then it's going down to smaller and smaller companies. In fact, companies as small as 10 have considered and are actually self-funding. And what's accelerated this was the requirements under ACA, and I'll be discussing how ACA has affected this. So the next thing I'm going to be talking about is self-funding in the marketplace today, who's doing it, why they're doing it. Then I'll talk about the fully insured versus the self-funding model, the mechanisms, what does it take to actually do self-funding. I'll be talking about self-funding scenarios, the pros and cons of self-funding, how healthcare reform has impacted self-funding, and lastly, I'll be talking about the financial plan design and legal compliance considerations. And that's important. And one thing I think to consider in this situation is the fact that one thing about about insured plans, I mean, you're relying on the insurance company to do everything. When you go self-insured as an employer, you're going to have to be more involved with the implementation and the administration of the plan. So that's something that as an employer you have to really concern yourself with.
Because I don't care what is going on.
Stacey, we can hear you.
So then if someone does a question.
Stacey? Okay. What is self-funding? Yeah.
Oh, sorry about that.
All right, no problem. You were kind of muffled in the background, so.
Oh, so sorry. Thank you.
No problem. What is self-funding? Well, an employer group wants to offer health benefits to their employees, but doesn't want to use an insurance company, as I indicated before. So basically, self-funding and self-insurance is the same term. And when you get involved in this, you have to look at two levels of self-funding, and this is important. The mega companies, the big corporations, do fully insured plans. Groups retain all the risk. They do not purchase stop-loss coverage, and these are usually like Microsoft or Walmart or General Motors. And basically, with these companies, what they can do is they can by self-funding, they set aside funds on behalf of the plan. So they have a Viva Trust, and they can create a reserve, and they're almost, in essence, like a insurance company because they do everything. And that's what most excuse me, medium-sized and small employers are not going to do. The second model is more or less what you're going to be dealing with. This is called partial self-funding. In this situation, the employer purchases an insurance policy to take part of the risk. On a smaller scale, a high deductible plan with an HRA is an example of somewhat like that, because the difference with the self-insured model is that you stop-loss coverage, and instead of like a high deductible plan where you have a deductible of $5,000 or $10,000, now you're on the hook for $50,000, $75,000, $100,000, $200,000. So any claims below that, you, the plan itself, and you as an employer are going to be liable for those claims under the plan. So again, the partially self-insured is what we're dealing with, and we're talking about self-funding, and that's what most medium-sized and smaller employers are dealing with when you go self-funded. So it's not the fully self-insured model; it's going to be the partially self-insured model that basically is the most common when we talk about self-insurance. So let's look at the, and this is something every year that the Kaiser Family Foundation looks at, and they look at what size companies are actually self-funding. And as you can see on that, with companies 5,000 or more workers, 91%, and it's increased over the years from 1999 to later into 2016. So that's something that they're doing now. When you go up to the 3 to 199, it's still very rare to self-fund it. Only 15% of the employers are self-funding, so it's not that common. It gets more common as you get bigger because the advantages get bigger. And again, with the larger companies, the advantages of self-funding is the fact that you can create a reserve and create a larger deduction for yourself, because you can, again, take a deduction today for actually creating reserve for those expenses that incurred but not paid. So, I mean, so this is something, so again, it's very common as you get larger. And when you get to the 299 employees, is half and half. And again, we're going to be talking about the advantages and disadvantages of going self-insured. And then percentage of covered workers in partially or completely self-funded plans by size. And again, what we're talking about here, small firms, and again, it hasn't varied that much over the years when you're dealing with companies between 3 to 99. It stays pretty much anywhere from 13 to 15 to 16%. Well, it's risen slightly for larger firms, 200 or more. It's 82%. So again, it's more common as the larger that you get. And then the type of plans that you have, what's interesting, what this slide tries to indicate is the fact the type of plan that you have will determine whether you're self-funded. And I think when you're looking at this, if you're with either a PPO or a high deductible plan, it's more common to be self-funded, because they're actually, when you do a high deductible plan, it's somewhat self-funded anyway, because the employee takes part of the risk. So it's more common to do it that way. With HMOs, it's, as you can see there, it's much less common to be self-insured. So again, these are the types of plans, and because more and more employers are going high deductible plans, the next step in that situation, because the employee is on the hook for more and more of the expenses, it's just natural to go into and look into self-funding. Now, the mechanics, the plan design in this situation, which you have to do is come up with a plan document and an SPD. And generally, when you create this, you sit down with a consultant or with someone that will design the program for you. So in a self-insured health plan, the employer, with the assistance of a broker or consultant and with an attorney, creates and defines and establishes a plan for its employees. So again, it's up to you what you want in your plan. So here, for groups that are currently fully insured, the new plans are normally modeled after the current fully insured plan. So you may want to replicate what you're currently now, because you don't want to disrupt what the employees currently have and what they're used to. Now remember that self-insured plans are governed by ERISA, so they're subject to federal law, but ERISA doesn't really pinpoint and requires that much to be in your plan document. I think it's more or less legally what you have to do is make sure you nail down what you're going to include, because you don't want disruptions or disagreements between you and your employees, what you're covering. And generally, when you have a self-insured plan, you kind of combine the plan document and SPD together. And normally, what you see here is a plan document anywhere from between 100 to 120 pages that includes all the different benefits you're going to include. Now, there's greater flexibility in regard to designing the program, but there's also greater liability because you have to nail down exactly what you're doing. And as an employer, and you're hiring the consultants and the attorneys to help you with this, you're going to be responsible. You have to be very clear in the sense of what you're going to be covering under your program. So you have more responsibility in this situation, because it's going to be your time with the help of consultants of what you're going to be covering under the plan. So here, normally when you go self-insured, here are the various players. Of course, the plan sponsor, and then you hire a consulting service to help you design the program. And then you hire someone like me to put it down on paper and make sure it meets all the different requirements, because even though you don't have state mandates, you still have federal mandates like Hipaa that you have to contend with. So you have to make sure it's within the boundaries of what the federal law and the various mandates are in the federal law. And then you have actuarial services that will tell you in that situation, will help you with the plan design, but also cost the plan, which is coming up with the premium, just like an insured plan, and determining what will need to the employer and the employees have to pay in order to support the plan that you have come up with. And then there's accounting and auditing services, especially in making sure that all the plan expenses and everything are well accounted for, because you're going to have more expenses in that. Instead of paying one price for the plan with an insurance company, you have various pieces that you have to pay. You have to pay a TPA, you have to pay various people, and you have to make sure that it adheres to all the requirements under ERISA. And then you have stop-loss carrier that basically, depending on and I'll be covering this in the next few minutes, what kind of risk you want to take as an employer, and they're going to cover the risk on the back end in trying to decide exactly what you're comfortable in taking a risk under your plan. And then most employers in this situation hire third-party administrators. It could be independent third-party administrator, or you could use one of the insurance companies. They will provide services to that. And then depending on what services you have, you may have third parties providing specialized plan services in regard to telemedicine, disease management, all kinds of other services. And then lastly, in order to make this function, then you have to go in and buy into one of the provider networks. And there are various different provider networks around the country, depending on who you are, that you can buy into. And many times the third-party administrators will have relationships with these provider networks to make sure that the providers and the discounts that you need are provided to the employees in the areas that they live. So as you can see here, there are various players that you have to involve in. Now, depending on the size you are, another player in this would be a trustee or custodian, especially if you're going to plan assets. You've decided you're large enough that you want to fund the benefits, and you want money set aside for those. And again, with self-funded plans, self-insured plans, you don't need to insure it. I mean, you don't need to fund it, but if you decide to do, ERISA requires that the money be that being set aside in the plan name be in a trust. And in that situation, to make life a little bit easier, you can then get a VIVA trust, and that what that means is the funds were sitting there accumulating tax-free, and that's one of the advantages. But the funds and the money that they held has to be large enough that will generate enough income that it's worth having a VIVA trust, because it has to file its own 5500. It's a tax organization. So in that situation, it could create even more fees that you have to contend with. So that adds a complication. Again, a funded plan is not required under ERISA, only if you're setting aside assets in the name of the plan. So paying claims. Self-funded employers can either administer the claims in-house or subcontract this service with a third-party administrator, a TPA. And I would advise you so much not to do it yourself, because it's a complication. There's all kinds of liability involved, and you want to make sure you know the person who's doing it has experience in paying claims, because there's some decisions you make in which you have to decide in this situation how much you're going to be involved in that. Because basically, when you're designing the program, there's going to be a situation where the claims are approved. If it's not approved, then you have to go through an appeal, and many times you have to decide in that situation, are you going to get involved after the claims are denied? Are you going to be take on that, what we call named fiduciary role, and decide those claims are denied, or are you going to hand that role over to the third-party administrator, and they're going to provide that service? That's called a fiduciary service. They make all the decisions. You're not involved. You're not involved. So, so the TPAs can also help employers set up a self-funded group health plans and coordinate stop-loss carriers. They can do a lot of the things in there that will help you to administer the plan. So again, you can decide to do a bundled ASO and unbundled, which means bundled is with an insurance company. They provide all the services. You decide which services you want. Everything is together. And many insurers have these services where they will actually take care of all the administration, and they will actually decide all the claims. So it's almost like an insured plan, but there's a stop loss in there, so it's self-insured. But again, you're involved in the front end to decide what you want. But again, they will take care of everything else. Unbundled means that you have an independent third-party administrator. You're slightly more involved, and you may have to deal with more than one vendor in the administration of the plan, depending on the size you are. In that situation, unbundled may be overwhelming. So TPAs may offer many services. They offer claims and premium administration. They do the reporting. They may help you with the plan document creation, how to coordinate your plan with the stop loss carrier. They may offer various services in entree to various other vendors, either in-house or subcontracted, which disease management, Hipaa compliance, or co-telemed. All that service can, depending on what services you provide or the TPA provides. And also, they may have relationships for providing PPO access networks, and then they can also do COBRA and Hipaa administration. So these are an array of services you may need, and depending on who you go with, well, they have some or all of these different services. So you have to decide exactly what you're going to do. And then what's important is mechanics, the PPO networks here for claims. And again, these are physician networks. Self-funded plans will typically lease a PPO network in order to provide their employees with the physicians in the hospitals, as well as to reduce the risk of the employer's claim from taking advantage of established PPO. So this will provide your plan, will provide the the discounts that normally an insured plan has. So you have to decide which of the physician networks will provide the services in your area that the employees expect. Somewhat replicate what's in an insured plan, but you rent the networks. And these are, again, discounts that these physician networks will provide. You have to be careful to decide which networks are best for your employees. And again, a TPA or a consultant can advise you exactly what networks are going to be important to your employees and your location. So these are, depending on which network, depending on the charge, and you have to be careful to decide which network provide. And again, what's important here is that you have to make a decision, especially the differences in the different networks could be a determining factor in designing your plan. And generally, narrower networks provide bigger discounts. But again, if it's important to you that your employees have access to various providers, you may go with a bigger network, but because of that, you may be paying higher prices. That's the problem. So you have to be very careful in what is going to be allowed and why it's allowed in this situation. So it's going to be extremely important to have your consultant help you decide which network is best for you in designing the program. Also, we have to look at is pharmacy, PBMs, pharmacy benefit management. And as this is, a PPM is usually a RX TPA married to an RX network, provide access to major pharmacies, negotiate discounts, manage formularies on behalf of the employer, may offer mail order or specifically, and there's various different PBMs that Express, CVS Caremark, there's various ones, and you have to decide in your area which has the best access. Most TPAs contract with numerous PBMs and are willing to integrate the RX claims information in their monthly reporting and stop-loss filing. Now, what's important here, depending on your size, will depend on what you're going to be getting, especially if you were insured. One of the complaints that small employers have, especially if you're between 50 to 150, depending on the insurance companies, you may not get all the information that you need to see whether your plan is working correctly. That's one of the advantages of working with the TPA and other consultants. You're going to get more information, and you have to have the staff to understand what information you're getting in consultants, and you can tweak your plan from year to year with the information that you receive from your TPA and your various vendors. And this is one area I think, especially it's a major driver for many plans. And this is something, depending on who you're involved in, you have to look at exactly what kind of reports and what kind of feedback you're getting in order to reduce costs. Also, with cost containment, employers also will add numerous features to manage both the frequency and severity of claims. So you may want to look at disease management, utilization review and management, case management, audit and review services, audit network negotiation, patient advocacy, and what's important right now and what's going across the country, I see more and more questions about this is tele-doc services. They're being integrated with many self-insured, but also many insured plans. And also, depending on what you want, there could be specialty care vendors, diagnologists, hemophilia services. And lastly, I think this is growing over the last 5 or 10 years as well as programs. Many insured plans have them, and you may want to find a vendor that does that. It can be integrated with yours. So depending on which TPA and PPO network you're involved in, could offer most or some of the services that you see here. So again, it's important on the front end to deal with the vendors and pick those services that are best for you in designing your program. And again, that's one of the advantages of having a self-insured program. You can pick and choose and not wait for the insurance company to offer those services. You have to decide exactly which of these services are going to be important to your employees. Stacey, do we have any questions?
Not at this time. No questions.
Okay. Next, let's turn into stop-loss insurance. So since the employer is accepting the financial responsibility for medical claims, there are two concerns. First of all, large claimants. Are you going to have employees or dependents that submit large claims? And how much, as an employer, are you going to be in the hook for? When you had insured plans, you would feel that at your next renewal. Well, here, in this situation, you're going to bear a part of the risk. So stop-loss insurance providers provide protection from large claimants and overutilization in any year. There's specific stop-loss carrier that covers catastrophic claims, and aggregate stop-loss covers overutilization, in other words, the total claims involved. And you have to decide which one is best for you. Either one or both of those different coverages are important. So the availability of competitive stop-loss coverage is one of the most critical components in determining the employer's ability to self-fund. You have to look at, okay, as an employer, what is my ultimate risk? And this is something you have to decide here when you are designing the program. What can we afford to do? Because the lower threshold that the stop-loss carrier comes in on, the higher the premiums are going to be. So you have to make a really important decision and have your finance people involved. Say, okay, we're going to do this, and work with your broker and like, okay, what makes sense for us and what kind of risk are we willing to take in designing this program? So looking at specific stop loss, the employer is responsible for all claims and every member until the deductible is met. So what we're dealing with here is a high deductible plan on steroids. So you decide, okay, for individual claims, when am I going to rely on the stop loss carrier to come in? So carriers can provide various deductible options to suit the group's risk tolerance. The higher the deductible, the lower the price of insurance. But again, the problem is, if it's a large claim, that claim is immediate. It's got to be paid. So you have to decide, do you have the cash to pay a large claim in a few months, as opposed to waiting for the increase in insurance premiums the next year. It's going to be felt almost immediately in this situation. So you will experience the lows, but also the highs, the high claims immediately. And you have to decide, what can we, if a huge claim came in, what as an employer can we tolerate? So again, carriers can provide various deductible options to suit the group's risk tolerance. So if something catastrophic came in, what is the most can you endure? What kind of cash or other reserves you have on hand to pay that claim in a few months once it's adjudicated? Occasionally, specific individuals will be subject to a higher deductible known as a laser. So again, we're talking about individual claims. Specific stop loss can target individuals, but also, in these situations, exactly what your liability is. So these are individual claims. Now let's look at aggregate stop loss. This is total. So the claim maximum is normally set at 25% higher than the expected claims. Aggregate can be difficult to secure due to lack of claims data, especially if you're moving from self-insured, from insured to self-insured. How much data do you have to decide exactly what you're willing to, as an aggregate, you're going to accept? Aggregates coverage is cheap. Sleep insurance, historically, a group has a 2% chance of hitting the maximum. So again, you have to look and see if you can get information about exactly what your experience has been in the past. So specific stop loss individual provides protection from the catastrophic losses of each individual insured by the plan. And an employer group with 250 selects a 75,000 specific deductible. Employee John Smith has a heart attack, and the total claims incurred during the hospital stay is $195,000. The employer is responsible for $75,000 medical expenses incurred by John Smith. The stop-loss carrier then reimburses the employer for the other $120,000 that exceeded the specific deductible. But again, this type of coverage is more expensive. Aggregate stop-loss. Aggregate stop-loss provides a second layer of protection for self-insured plans. The aggregate deductible is determined by the insurance company and regularly sets at 125% of expected claims for the group. And again, the more information you can provide the stop-loss carrier what their ultimate responsibility is going to be better to decide exactly where the sweet spot is in a sense of what your responsibility is going to do. So a stop-loss carrier evaluates 250 of the employee's data and develops an expected attachment of point of 2 million. They then adjust it by 25% to arrive at a maximum claims of 2.5 million as a kind of a fudge factor. So items to consider: aggregate claims can be difficult to secure due to lack of claims data. So again, if you're in the process of deciding whether to go self-insured, the more information you can obtain from your current insurer to see what your claims are and what your possible design, because it will help you. You don't want to underbuy or overbuy the aggregate stop loss. Buy insurance either you don't need or underinsure, and all of a sudden now you have a claim of 3 million, you only picked a limit of 1 million, you're on the hook. So again, it's important to decide and have enough information that you hit it just at the right spot. So aggregate coverage is not always purchased since the medical claim costs rarely exceed 125% of expected claims. So standard stop-loss options. Since the claims are not received and paid within a year, stop-loss is sold at various contracts offering coverage for claims incurred prior to the effective date, run-ins, and claims that are paid after the policy which is run out. So two important terms are important. Incurred as a date refers to the date that the member receives care. This number designates the number of months the qualified claims have incurred. Paid, second number, paid date refers to the date that the claim is paid by the administrator. This number designates the number of months a qualified claim is paid. The turnaround for in this situation to be paid is between 6 to 10 months. So there's various options here. Here we have a 12 coverage. Claims must be incurred and paid within the same 12-month period. A 12 coverage has no runout and no runout protection, sometimes sold as terminal life liability option. This contract can be used to help a group transition from self-insured to self-insured funding. Another option is called a stop-loss of 12-15. Here, the claims must be incurred within 12 months and paid within 3 months following the end of coverage. This type of coverage is called a runout. It's available in either 12 and 18 or 12-24. And for fully insured policies are on an accrued basis and typically offer 12 to 24 or greater. And this is indicating what they're responsible for. Another is 15-12 coverage. Claims must be incurred within 15 months and paid within 12 months. This type of coverage is called a run-in. This available as either 18-12, 24-12, or paid basis. So these are typical, and I think your broker can explain this better than I can. I'm not an insurance broker, but there are various options of what the stop loss will be responsible for. This is what I'm trying to indicate to you. So in dealing with a fully insured prospect, a prospective client currently offers 3 plans. All plans are currently fully insured through a major insurance company. The CFO and the CFO of the organization believes that the insurance company is making money at an annual consistent basis off of their workforce's good claims and costs. Their desire of cash flow and benefits design. The broker, consultant, and client work to secure claims data. This is important. Enrollment information, plan design so that the stop-loss carriers will have enough information to make an appropriate evaluation of risk. That's important. This is the first step if you're deciding to go from fully insured to self-insured. This explains exactly what you have to do. After working with multiple stop-loss markets, the group receives their stop-loss codes and now have the ability to determine the cost scenarios, including potential claims, liability, stop-loss premium, and plan administration. So all this is done in the beginning to decide exactly what the best design is. You can't do it in the vacuum. Here you have a real-life scenario, fully insured. On the right is the fully insured, 2.7 million. The risk corridor is $450,000. Expected claims is 1.8 million. Stop loss is 400 after 400,000. Auxiliary vendors are 350. These are the costs. PPO fees are 650,000. This is the total maximum liability here. So in this situation, adding it up, there could be this is the maximum liability that the employer will have. And plan administration is $200,000. So this is all the costs involved and running a plan. So again, it could be slightly higher, but again, you have more control over it. So what are the potential what are the potential disadvantages and potential exposures in trying to decide what to do? Again, despite all the planning, potential claim liability claims come in above expected. You look at your prior experience, now you have 2 or 3 either employees or dependents that have bigger than claims that you expected. Not building claim reserves underfunded. You decide to fund the plan and you don't have enough money. Securing competitive stop loss because your group size, location, availability, claim data, you may not get the competitive stop loss quotes that you were expecting. Also, the fact if you have money set aside, to run the plan, and there's a crisis of your company, you could lose whatever money is set aside for the plan. Again, this is a violation of ERISA, but again, many times, if the plan is unfunded, the money is sitting in a corporate account, and there's a crisis in your company, you need funds. This is a really easy way of getting immediate funds in order to fund some type of financial emergency. You have to be very careful in doing it. Also, in this situation, I've seen this time and time again, where before it was very easy to say to an employee, well, we can't pay the claim, the insurance company says no. When you're self-funded, it may be easier for the employer to say, well, for you, Joe, you're a really good employee, and we're going to decide in this situation to make an exception for you, so we'll pay your claim. And this is where self-funded plans, you have to basically be very careful on what you do, because if you create an exception for one, if somebody else comes in a few months later and wants the same deal, it's kind of hard to say no. Also for Hipaa compliance, with Hipaa privacy. Remember, one of the advantages of a self-funded plan is the fact you're getting more information. And because of that, you have more exposure for Hipaa privacy violations under this situation. To be very careful and make sure you hit all the buttons and train your people with all the different information that you're receiving. Also, one of the other disadvantages now, you're going to have non-discrimination testing. Now, non-discrimination testing was proposed for insured plans a number of years ago, but nothing ever happened. Now you're going to have a self-insured plan, and basically you have to make sure that the plan is run consistently and uniformly with each employee. It's kind of tough to provide a better benefit or a better contribution strategy for your executives versus the rank and file and meet the non-discrimination testing. Also, employers must maintain cash flow. There's a lot of expenses here that have to be paid during the year, and you have to make sure you have the cash to pay all the different vendors you're going to have involved here. Let's look at some of the self-funding advantages. Control of plan design. Well, if you're buying an insured product, whatever is in the contract, what they file with the state, that's what you get. So if you want higher benefits or lower benefits in one area versus another, you don't have that choice. It's whatever the insurance company has filed with the state, that's what you get. So again, you can tweak the plan design that you already have as an insured plan and increase or decrease certain coverages that you don't think that you paid for, but the employees don't use. And this is, again, somebody has to analyze exactly what coverage is important to your employees. Also, ancillary services. What extra services does your employees need? And again, under the insurance company, if the insurance company offers an array of services, you may pick one or two, but not 6 or 7 that you're paying for. Here you can pinpoint exactly what services with ancillary services you're not. Also, collection of health plan data. You're going to get more data when you're self-insured than insured, depending on the size that you are. Also, lower administrative costs. You're not putting into paying for the insurance company's profit. So there could be lower cash administrative costs. And if you have a good year, there could be cash flow benefits. Because remember, if you have a good year or a bad year, you still have to pay the insurance company premium. But if you have a good year and your claims are down, you could take advantage of that. Also, if you want to fund your benefits, you have the ability to build reserves depending on the size that you are. And you can create a VIBA and create funds for the future to pay for benefits. Again, there's an elimination of carrier profit margin. You don't have to pay for that. Reduce any premium tax that the ACA had. Avoidance of any health insurance industry tax. And again, most important is depending on the state that you're in, you don't have to pay those insurance mandates. So that's extremely important depending on what state you're in. There could be mandates that you don't want, your employees don't want, you don't need, and by going self-insured, you don't have to provide those state insurance mandates. You still have to contend yourself with the federal mandates. ACA, when healthcare reform came in and accelerated the interest because of the various different mandates that came in through ACA for insured plans. So interest is bounded because historically has been even before ACA. In 1999, 44% of all employees were covered self-insured. Now it's 61%. ACA requires employers with 50 or more to pay or play. This may leave employers for health benefits and self-insured funding. And again, because you have to provide coverage or pay the penalty, non-employers are looking at reducing costs. So better strategy position to adjust benefits to control increased costs, and fully insured premiums are expected to jump to accommodate the new provisions. And again, if you're under 50, you have all those essential health benefit requirements. So again, this has accelerated employers' interest in going self-insured. So other considerations, limited exposure because self-insured to the medical loss ratio rules, guaranteed issue. So remember, this guaranteed issue does not apply to stop-loss carriers. They can deny you, so that's one thing you have to look at. Stop-loss premiums are not subject to ACA fees. Additional considerations: if you're self-insured, you don't have to provide for essential benefits. Avoidance of the health insurance tax, that goes in and out. You're not subject to most premium tax. And again, you're not subject to state mandated benefits. Those are all considerations. Also, we look at the PCORI fee and other fees involved. We've already talked about that. And other fees, we've talked about that. So let's look at some of the considerations because I'm running out of time. Financial considerations. Well, again, if you're insured, you have, again, the premium is due every month, and there could be an adjustment in the next month. When you're dealing with self-insured programs, claims must be incurred by the participant, submitted for payment by the provider, generally to approved by payment by the TPA. So depending on how long it takes, it may be months before you have to fund that benefit. So what's hard to get used to is claims are incurred unevenly throughout the year. So if you have good experience, you can immediately feel that good experience. And there are ways to make cash flow more regular in a self-insured plan, such as setting aside amounts every month, perhaps based on a fraction of the actuarial estimate of full year's claims, in order to create a cushion in your corporate books and your corporate funds to make sure you can accommodate a large claim. So again, this is going to be somewhat different than you were on when you were insured. Appetite for financial risk. And again, when you go self-insured, you're going to be responsible to pay claim means, assuming the risk that claims will exceed estimates. Even estimates are calculated by an experienced actuary. That is, claims can exceed the plan sponsor's ability to pay. So you have to take that. And again, as I indicated before, the stop-loss insurance is important to reduce your risk. So a plan sponsor purchasing stop-loss insurance pays a monthly premium for stop-loss coverage after claims by the plan exceed. So that's important to damp down your appetite for financial risk. And can self-insured plans reduce healthcare costs? They eliminate significant components that make up an insurance premium, such as profits, just as taxes. The overall saying, again, don't enter into this thinking that you're always going to make more money. Saving is not guaranteed. Depending on unexpected risks, significant plan expenses. But again, self-insurance does avoid certain fees and cumbersome burdens. Also, depending on what you want to do, you could have either bundled or unbundled approach. And again, claim costs are based on estimates. So you have to be sure you have a good consultant to estimate exactly so there's no surprises. And you may have to engage an actuary to help really determine what your true cost is going to be so there's no surprises. So getting a team together to really design the plan is going to be very important so there's no surprises. So, and again, looking at all this, the bottom line is an employer may prefer to pay fixed premiums, reasoning that the insurer may be in a better position to manage the employee's claims risk for a broader risk pool. So again, it depends on the information that you have, how large your group is, and whether one or two or three claims is going to throw everything off. And that's what you're risking in a situation when you go self-insured. A few claims could throw everything off. Also, state law mandates, I've talked about this. ERISA preempts and supersedes state law. So again, self-insurance has the effect of avoiding many state law mandates, which is extremely important. And this affects self-insuring plan sponsors and several advantages. Consistently in plan design when operating in multiple states, which is important. greater freedom to determine eligibility rules, greater freedom in determining covered benefits, and greater flexibility to exclude or limit coverage in certain types of claims. With the state law in the past have required you to do so, when you go self-insured, what this slide is trying to indicate, that's eliminated. And again, with healthcare reform, as I indicated before, there are additional fees and costs, and healthcare reform also guaranteed benefits. We've talked about that, but that also affects plan design considerations. And finally, is that a major decision you have to make in legal and compliance considerations is final authority in claims decisions. You as an employer in self-insurance may have, and you can decide whether you want to do this, whether you're going to have final decisions on paying claims. So an employer can exercise control over benefit approval, interpret plan language, and decide whether a claim should be paid. Because under an insured plan, the insurance company has that authority and that discretion. So should an employer engage a claims fiduciary? And some employers who do self-funded plans give that authority either to the TPA or to the insurance company who is administering their self-insured plan. So that's something you have to decide. And also, when I indicated before, and I just want to stress this, greater control over plan documents. With the help of an attorney and an actuary and a consultant, you decide what's going to be contained in your plan document. You can draft your own plan document or use a prepackaged set of materials, and many insurance companies provide that. But again, the more involved you are, the greater the terms of the plan will reflect you. And you as an employer, if you're doing self-insurance, has the fiduciary responsibility to review the plan documents to understand it. So again, there's greater responsibility there. And then also there's greater compliance responsibilities, update documents and disclosures, distributing disclosures, conduct the non-discrimination testing, and again, complying with Hipaa privacy matters. So this is all going to be in your time. You can, again, some of this you can contract out, but again, ultimately it's the plan sponsor who's responsible for doing this. And again, because you don't have an insurance company between you and the participant, you have greater risk of claims litigation. Here, if you have an insurance company, the insurance company will then defend claims litigation. Here, when you are self-insured, there's no one between you and the claimant. So think litigation-related issues when negotiating a TPA.
Thank you everyone for joining us today. We hope you can make it Tuesday, April 17th for our next webinar, which is on advanced ERISA compliance. Any questions that weren't answered in our tab, I think we just had one, I will make sure that we get that answer to you privately. Larry will get that over to you. Thanks everyone for joining us. Have a great day.
Thank you.